So, KrisAnne, I would like to address my first question at the Second Amendment, stepping back a couple of amendments here. The Second Amendment reads, "A militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." To me, it makes a very definitive statement of our rights as recognized under the Constitution. Gun owners and the Second Amendment as a whole has been kind of relegated to the second-class citizenship. And I would like to address a couple of issues with that. In the state of California, in most all counties in California, the ability to obtain a concealed weapons permit is next to impossible. California is a may-issue state. It is up to the sheriff to determine whether or not you are eligible to be issued a concealed weapons permit. And in most places, like the county of Los Angeles, for example, if you are not a major campaign contributor, if you are not an entertainer, if you are not someone on a special list of some kind, your ability to obtain that permit is almost impossible. And it is my contention that the Second Amendment is my concealed weapons permit. So my question to you is this, is how do we as a people begin to recapture our rights as delegated under the Constitution? We have a scenario where our rights are being stepped on virtually every day, not only in our state, but in states throughout the country and by the federal government. We have limited recourse. The Supreme Court decided under the Heller decision, actually let me correct myself, in the opinion of the Supreme Court under Heller, the Second Amendment is an individual right. Under the McDonald opinion, it is incorporated through the 14th Amendment to the states, and we see a scenario virtually every day where jurisdictions such as Washington, D.C., such as Chicago, are refusing to recognize the Constitution as it's written and refusing to allow people their rights. They thumb their nose at these decisions by the Supreme Court. And so I would like to hear your thoughts on how we as a people recapture our fundamental rights as they are described in the Constitution.
Samuel Adams said, "No people will tamely surrender their liberties when knowledge is diffused and virtue is preserved." He said, "But on the contrary, when a people become universally ignorant and debauched in their manners, they will sink underneath their own weight without the aid of foreign invaders." First thing we need to do is correct a few things about the way we think. Our right to keep and bear arms does not come from the Second Amendment. Our right to keep and bear arms is a natural right. It is based on natural law. It is based on the first principle of natural law, the right to self-preservation. Samuel Adams wrote in 1772, he said, "Among the natural rights of the colonists are these: first, life; secondly, liberty; third, property; together, number 4, with the right to protect and defend them in the best means possible." So what we need to understand here is that our right to keep and bear arms does not come from the Constitution. It doesn't come from the Second Amendment. It doesn't come from government. It comes from God. Our right to defend our life, our liberty, and our property are essential rights, and we have to think about these things from this perspective. We've lost complete touch with what a right really is. Now, think about this. If you do not have a right to life, remember Adam said life, liberty, property, and the right to protect and defend, these 3. These are your 4 rights. He says they stem from the first law of nature, the law of self-preservation, okay? So if you do not have a right to life, what that means is you have to ask permission to live. So you either have a right to live or you live by permission. If you have to ask permission to live, then you are a dead man. If you have to have a right to liberty, if you do not have a right to liberty, then liberty is by permission. And if you have to ask permission to have liberty, you do not have rights. You have privileges established by government, and you are a subject. You have to have a right to acquire and your property. Now, what we have to understand here as well is that property, we've sort of limited this application of property. James Madison wrote a wonderful paper, dissertation on property, in which he explains that property is not just simply where you sit your feet. It's not where you build your house. Your ideas are your properties, your thoughts. He said your religious beliefs are property. The exercise of your religious beliefs are property. The sweat of your brow, your ideas, and the operations of your faculties are your property. So property is a really big thing. And so if you do not have a right to secure your property, then you secure property by permission. And if you have to ask permission to secure your property, then you are indentured. You are not free. And if you have to ask, if you do not have a right to protect your life, your liberty, or your property, and you have to ask permission to protect your life, your liberty, and your property, then you are a slave. And so what we need to understand is this fundamental aspect of the right to keep and bear arms is essential to this natural law right of life, liberty, property, and self-preservation. And that's where we have to begin this education with the people, because we have become universally ignorant. We've become, under this common belief that the only reason we need guns is so we can shoot rabbits. Okay. Or go skeet shooting, or even in the most extreme, to defend ourselves from robbers and rapists. Well, we have forgotten, number one, once again, that our right to defend our life, our liberty, and property is an essential natural right. And number two, it doesn't come from government. It doesn't come from documents. And so we need to now understand, why did our framers decide to codify this essential right? Because there's lots of rights that they did not codify. Why did they codify this essential one? First and foremost, every single one of the framers who will argue before their House of Representatives on the codification of the Second Amendment and the Bill of Rights will tell you, we must have a Bill of Rights to remind the people when they fall asleep that government can't take your rights. So the whole purpose of the entire Bill of Rights is to be a reminder to us to not let government take our rights, to not let ourselves be silenced by losing our freedom of speech or freedom of press, to not become enslaved by losing our right to peaceably assemble, to not become servants of government by losing our right to petition the government for a redress of our grievances, and these types of things. So really, the Second Amendment was put into the Bill of Rights to remind us to never be disarmed. Noah Webster, he's the guy who wrote the dictionary. He's also a founder of our American constitutional republic, and our independence from Great Britain, said, "Before a standing army can rule, the people must be disarmed, as they are in almost every kingdom in Europe." And they're talking about the people being disarmed. So our right to keep and bear arms is a natural right to preserve our right to life, liberty, and property. It is the right to keep and bear arms is codified in the Second Amendment so that the people will not allow themselves to be disarmed. So if you think that the right to keep and bear arms hinges upon hunting, then what you have to admit then is that our framers were afraid that the deer and the rabbit would organize to disarm us, right? Because the whole Second Amendment is to keep us from being disarmed. If you think that the Second Amendment was placed in there so that we could collect guns and go sport shooting, then you have to admit that our framers were afraid that the sportsmen and the gun collectors would organize to disarm all other Americans except themselves. If you believe that the Second Amendment was codified to protect us only in our homes from robbers and rapists, then you must then admit that our framers were afraid that the criminals would organize in a criminal racket to disarm all the law-abiding citizens so that only criminals could carry firearms and the law-abiding citizens would have none. I mean, all of those premises are ridiculous, aren't they?
Yeah.
Because the entire reason we codified the Second Amendment was not about hunting, skeet shooting, gun collecting, or robbers and rapists. It was because our framers knew that when government has the power to disarm the people are immediately enslaved. So it was a reminder to us, because our framers knew human nature, that we fall asleep after a while, we become pacified in prosperity, lazy in luxury. And when that happens, government increases in power, people's liberty decreases, and that's when the government starts disarming its people.
Well, KrisAnne, if I could follow up just briefly with that, your comments there, I think this helps drive home that point further. Recently in the state of Oregon, a group of who I consider to be patriots chose to exercise their First Amendment rights by assembling, second, by demanding a redress of grievances to their federal government over the use of land, public lands. The federal government has been in a battle with these individuals over land rights. As I can tell, the worst crime that they perpetrated was trespassing on quote-unquote federal land. This land is public land, a wildlife refuge. That they believe they chose this land because it would be of low impact on the local population, and yet enable them to drive home their point. These individuals traveled freely around this Mahler Wildlife Refuge in Oregon, traveled back and forth to town on several occasions to interact with the FBI and other federal officials over their demands, over their grievances. And the FBI chose to shut them down. The FBI and the Oregon State Police essentially ambushed them on a road, attempted a traffic stop, and as a result, one of the protesters, a gentleman by the name of Lavoy Finnegan, was shot dead in the process, shot 9 times. And as I understand, there is some reasonably strong evidence now that the FBI in turn attempted to cover up some of the things that transpired that day. So again, my question is we seem to be headed down this road that is quickly leading to violence. The federal government is presenting the people with very few avenues of recourse. And one of the things that I see as inevitable is eventually here the people are going to begin to push back towards the government. And I think that the potential end result of that could be catastrophic. It's definitely something that neither one of us want to see, but it definitely seems to be headed in that direction. What do you see as our avenues of recourse?
Well, the recourse really isn't a violent one at this point. The recourse, we have lots of options available to us because, once again, our framers did not create a constitutional republic. They did not create a kingdom, rather. They created a constitutional republic. And the constitutional republic is our defense. You see, the real defense here is that our sheriffs and our state legislators and our governors should be standing up to the federal government and saying, look, we do not recognize this authority that you're exercising as a lawful one. Number one, it doesn't come from the Constitution, and the only authority that you have, federal government, is power that's been delegated to you. If it's not been specifically delegated, it is reserved to the states. Land other than 10 miles square and forts and ports and dockyards and territories have been delegated which have been delegated to the federal government. Every other piece of land is reserved to the states, which means the states have complete jurisdiction over their land. These national forests are a federal theft. They're completely unconstitutional. The federal government had no authority to create federal lands by congressional act because there's no delegated authority to do that. And so their exercising power over these lands is an unauthoritative power, which means it has no force at all. It's void of all force and law. And so what we need are not the people standing up for themselves, but the states and the sheriffs standing up on behalf of the people. I mean, that's the way the constitutional republic's supposed to work. If the people are left to defend themselves against the federal government, then we are not a constitutional republic. We are a federal kingdom.